Jesus Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And it's precisely this beautiful account that we've just finished listening to from which that phrase comes from. It is the turnaround that happened to these disciples. They recognized him. They head back in the right direction. They meet up with the rest of the apostles. And that exchange is the one that occurred. Good morning to everybody. If you've just logged on, please don't click away. This Mass is going to be some Mass that is going to, I hope, transform your heart. So as you stay logged on in a few moments, we will have Jesus present upon the altar, where you will be able to see him in person. It is him whom we long to see. This is a third Sunday of Easter. We've had the Easter Sunday, last Sunday, Divine Mercy Sunday. I hope God showered you with tremendous blessings and calmness. God wants to bring us calmness in heart in the midst of this storm. It's like a storm that just simply doesn't want to move forward. It's kind of like stuck there. But we're praying and hoping that it moves forward, and it will. So hang in there. And in this storm, we have to be able to log into our heart and our emotions, and our mind has to log into this phrase, that Jesus Christ is risen, that he is risen indeed. That's a phrase that cannot just be left in the pages of the gospel, but a phrase that I hope and pray that you're using various times throughout the day. And especially when it sort of creeps in, that sense of despair, that moment of anxiousness or anxiety starts creeping in, when things are the walls are closing in. That's that moment when I need to sort of have that kind of aspiration, that small prayer, Jesus Christ is risen, he is risen indeed. I have to do that. Because in the midst of this troubling time, I have to anchor myself on the one truth that changed the entire course of history. And that's why I shared another phrase with you. Jesus saves, Jesus conquers. Say that throughout the day. In the morning, in the middle of the morning, in the afternoon, midday, later in the evening. And I'm telling you, God will give you, when we say this with faith, because we have to say it with faith, because he is truly the one who has the last word. So I hope and pray that these days, as troubling as they are, as filled with anxiousness as they are, and as disturbing as they are, Jesus Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Has to be that small prayer, that aspiration that we do every single time throughout the day. This couldn't have been a better Sunday that we hear this gospel account of these two disciples that are headed towards Emmaus. You know how many artists, poets have written about this, painted, Carracci painting his famous picture. And so many artists and prayers and painters and sculptors have drawn on this image, this great account, this privileged opportunity that we have of listening to the story of these two disciples and how they recognized Jesus going in the wrong direction. These guys were going in the wrong direction. They had just left Jerusalem. But you see, we have to walk in their sandals a little bit, because their story is also a story that we can connect really now more than ever. Because their story speaks to us right now. They're in the middle of this pandemic. These guys, like the apostles that were in Jerusalem, still locked behind doors, mind you. Their whole world had fallen apart. Every hope that they had, every aspiration that they had, every longing that they had died with them the moment in which that violent death took place upon the person that they hung their entire life on. Their whole hope was on Jesus. Remember, Jesus not only spoke very powerfully, but he demonstrated himself with miracles they had never seen before, never even imagined. They were witnesses to this. And therefore, they were following him because their whole life hinged upon Jesus of Nazareth. And what happens? This cruel end in a crucifixion, like most other criminals that were put to death in capital punishment in the Roman Empire, and all their hopes were dashed, destroyed. And even then, the finality of the body of Jesus being put into the tomb, and this big old stone rolled over and sealed with the Roman seal. That's it. Might as well die. We've been there. Moments of discouragement, moments that we feel huge loss. You imagine so many people now that have their family members in the hospitals being treated because of this coronavirus. They can't talk to them. They can't see them. The nurses and doctors are even moved like never before. Before we thought that they were indifferent. No, not anymore. They're moved by the fact that family members can't speak to them and they can't be visited. And the worst of them all is those people who die in the hospital and they haven't even been able to be seen. There are people, there's somebody right now in hospital, not from our parish, there's someone right now in the hospital, basically, who doesn't know that his wife has passed away. And he's dealing with respiratory issues, but he's in the hospital in ICU, he can't get out. But his wife has passed away. Folks, this is heartbreaking. So if we know this, and we know of so many situations where we are experiencing discouragement and loss, then we are in the same position as these disciples, these two guys that were headed out of Jerusalem, hightailing to a little town obscure somewhere on the outskirts that represents the Roman status, the Roman rule, the Roman power and success and Roman glory. They were headed in the wrong direction. Don't we all? When we are experiencing loss, disappointment, discouragement, don't we all go in the wrong direction? So we're no different than these two guys hightailing out of Jerusalem because everything that they had hoped for had been dashed. Imagine your discouragement. Multiply that by a factor of 1,000, and now you have what the disciples were going through. Maybe before they were just stories in a page. No. These are real stories, real witnesses whose lives were dashed because of the death of Jesus. And they couldn't see past the end of their nose. They were blinded by their own discouragement and their own loss. And they were headed out to this little town called Emmaus. From this, retreats have come out, and people's lives have changed when they hear this account. Because here's the thing. Why we need to identify ourselves with these disciples is because Jesus, in one moment, changes everything. And that moment of change, we must share in that. In one moment, Jesus changes everything. We've seen that with people's lives. We've seen how they've turned around in an unexplainable manner. But yet, many people have been praying for maybe months and years. But that one moment, God's will allows a change, a metanoia, a transformation. And all of a sudden, we start heading in the right direction. We see it happening in people's lives. So the same thing happened to them. Jesus shows up, enters the conversation that they're having. They're so distraught, they can't see and recognize that it's Jesus. They can't. Jesus then joins the dialogue, and at the end, he is reprimanding them. He says, "How foolish you are. How slow of heart are you?" I don't want to be hard of heart. I don't want to be blinded. But yet we've been there. When we've been really angry, very upset, very disappointed. I can't even see God. I can't even see people who are maybe coming to my aid. Talk to anybody who's maybe in a situation of life and death, and they will tell you after the fact, "I don't know, someone came to me. I don't know who it is, but it was like an angel that came to me." They couldn't even recognize who it is that came to rescue them. Happened to the disciples on the way to Emmaus. It happens to us now. And it's happening to many people now that they feel very much trapped by this coronavirus. It's almost that it's really getting at them. And therefore, Jesus comes to us, and in one moment, he changes everything. And that's what we need to pay our attention on. Jesus then begins to interpret the Scriptures, the whole of the Old Testament, in a way like it had never occurred to them before, to the point that to their testimony, they say that their hearts were burning. Have you had that experience? You're listening to a gospel, and you're going through something at that moment that you identify with so much, and that word that's being spoken to you, it becomes like a burning sensation inside of you, where you're saying that everything that I needed to hear is right there. Well, these disciples had that experience. And then something extraordinary happens. And this is really the heart of the whole gospel. So I encourage you to go back, chapter 24 of the Gospel of Luke, in that 13th verse, and read it very slowly, because we identify with them very much. But then comes this turnaround, this moment of change. Jesus makes it seem like he's going to keep walking. They beg him to stay. Jesus stays with them, goes into the house. They sit down at table. He takes bread, blesses it, and breaks them. And at that moment, their eyes are open, says the gospel. They recognized him. And bam! He vanishes. Personally, that's the very coolest thing in the world, I think. I've been reading this gospel since I was a teenager, and I thought that was the coolest thing. But I'm going to tell you something. He vanishes. And what stays there? The bread that has now become Jesus himself. See, this is the thing. The ultimate means by which we recognize Jesus is not in the Scriptures, but it's in the Eucharist. Because it is there that we help to see the key, as it happened to the disciples, the key to understanding all things. It was Jesus' emptying of himself, his ekenosen, his kenosis, emptying of himself, the divine love pouring itself out completely for us on that Mount of Calvary, on the cross, in his suffering and in his death. He pours himself out as a sacrifice, and later in the resurrection, so that we may be brought back online with him. That's why Peter, in the second reading, says, listen, you've been ransomed from our futile conduct, says the Scriptures. Ransomed from my futile conduct. That means ransomed from my manner of acting and living and behaving that's going in the wrong direction. God is going in this direction, we're going in that direction. And God does not wait for me to come, but he rather goes after me even if I'm going in the wrong direction. And at that moment, they recognized him. This is extremely important because there they recognize the person of Jesus, as we do, and we've been privileged to do so, Sunday after Sunday. Have we recognized him? The Eucharist himself is the person of Jesus. At that moment, his body, blood, soul, divinity, the very person of Jesus. And that changed everything for them. They were headed in the wrong direction. They picked up their bags and they went after the place where that sacrifice was done. That self-emptying of divine love happened at the cross so that we may be brought back from the place of rebelliousness into the divine love of God. This is important. And I have to think about these things because I do not want anybody to get used to this live streaming of virtual masses. we need to come back here. And we need to gather around this altar of worship and sacrifice. And we will, but we need to be patient. And we need to get back to what maybe in the past was a cause of conflict for many families. You know, getting up early in the morning, making sure that we get our children ready, that we dress them up. I know there's a sacrifice involved in that. Maybe oftentimes a little bit of a scuffle takes place, a little bit of an argument takes place. We need to get back with that with a whole new set of eyes as people have recognized Jesus in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of our loss and discouragement and a sense of great pain. I need to recognize Jesus that comes after me and that in a moment changes everything. But we need to get back to that, getting in the car and driving to church and coming back into the place of worship. Right now, this is an extraordinary situation. And we're all feeling the pain of it, the absence of it. I keep saying to you the very weirdness, for a lack of words, of an empty church. And I'm communicating with you and Deacon and those who are helping us with the music to make it very pleasant for you as you're praying with us here. And Jesus knows your heart, and he knows your mind, and he knows your intentions. It is for us to allow this time to build up a burning sensation in us to come back to him and beg him to stay with us. That we come back to church and no longer is going to be a problem. It's not going to be a conflict. It's going to be a hopeful desire to gather back again as Jesus interprets the scriptures for us, the liturgy of the word, and then he breaks himself open for us, the liturgy of the Eucharist, so that we can see his person. The Eucharist is Jesus Christ. This is a reality that has to transform our lives from here on. Maybe it took a pandemic to do so. Whatever the case. You know, back in 2000, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to share this story. I know many years I did at some point, but back in 2000, a very impactful moment in my life in a World Youth Day event with St. John Paul II. And there was a time in those days in which I got separated from the rest of the group. We were in St. Peter's Basilica, and it was a very powerful moment, and so everybody left us. And we were there by ourselves. So I said with the small group of young people that had there, about 8 of them, I said, you know what, I'm going to show you something that I really want you to see. Let's go to the catacombs. And we took a bus, and we went walking, I don't know how many miles. We finally get to the catacombs of St. Sebastian. Powerful moment of encounter there of how the early church was celebrating Mass. I wanted to take them a little further to the catacombs of St. Calixtus, but that was closed. And here we are on the Appian Way. This is like the major highway of the infrastructure of Roman Empire. The Appian Way. You've all heard about it. And we come across this very insignificant little Romanesque church that is on the side of the road, few people coming in. And it is called La Chiesa di Santa Maria di Palmis. That means footprints, because something happened there according to a text that was circulating in the early, just before the 2nd century. A legend, to sort of say, that St. Peter was hightailing out of Rome because he's being persecuted, much like the 2 disciples on the way to Emmaus. And what happens that at this spot, he encounters Jesus going in the opposite direction back to Rome. Peter, surprised at this, says the legend, the story, says, Domine, quo vadis? Lord, where are you going? To which Jesus responds to him, Eo Romam iterum crucifigi. I'm going back to Rome to be crucified again. This impacted Peter. And Peter then says, Lord, I will go with you. Ultimately, we all know what history tells us. Peter received the crown of his martyrdom in 64 when he too was crucified upside down. My dear friends, maybe this pandemic has helped me to stop and think, since we've had time to pray, time to have solitude, think, read the scriptures a little bit more. Maybe God is revealing, hey, I don't want you to go in the wrong direction. I want you to come in the direction that I'm going. And maybe it's time to turn from the way in which I was headed into the way that Jesus wants me to go. He's revealed himself to you in many different ways. So I beg you, if anything great comes out of this pandemic, if you've been separated from the church for a long time, and maybe for reasons that have been very painful to you, I got it. I am very sorry that you have been through that. But I am begging you, come back home. Let this time be a time for you to come back home. Because Jesus is going this way. He doesn't want you to go that way. He wants you to go where his divine love is. Come back home. Because Jesus is risen. He is risen indeed. And that is a fact that's going to bring us home together one day. But I must change and discover him in the Eucharist. Come back home. Don't stay away. He loves you too much.